everybody. This has really been quite the day. I'm sure you guys are feeling a little bit tired and things, and you're probably starting to feel pretty overwhelmed as you look at the schedule, knowing that tomorrow, I think, he has even more than today does, and you're going, I don't know that I can do enough with even today's stuff. The challenge, especially if you're at home or in your office and you're watching a lot of these webcasts, you're probably being more inspired than you have time to take to do anything with. And I'm going to just say, for those of you at home or in the office, what a lot of these folks already know, it's that you can't do everything that you've watched. And you have to pick and choose, really, what has God placed you in your location for? What are the talents that he's given you? You've probably watched a few of these other speakers and thought, man, I wish I could be more like that, or I wish that I had this or that quality, or I need to grow in this area. And maybe there are some areas you need to grow, but I just want to encourage you to, more than anything, consider, what does God want to do with you? And how can you be the best version of yourself? And this really isn't about you in the end anyhow. This is really about an amazing God that has allowed us to be a part of his journey. So when you go home, you're going to have a lot of opportunities to make changes. And if you're like me, you've gone home from some conferences and you have had all these ideas, and then you get there and you start to get back into the grind of things, and the notes sit in your file on your computer, or maybe on the table or something, and on your shelf, and you can easily forget about them. Or maybe you have ideas of what you want to do, but you're very afraid to make those changes. It can be very daunting. I'm not entirely sure that I know exactly how, and it's a lot easier to keep something good going than to try to shut that down, start something new that could be great, but maybe I fail and wreck both of them. Or maybe you've had this, probably more this one than either of the other two. You go home and you try to blaze through and make some of those changes, and you start to find that you're meeting opposition that you didn't expect. No one else seems to be near as excited about this as you are. Nobody else seems to really see it the way that you're seeing it, and it's because you experienced something. Something happened to you. There was a process that took place, and you have an important job to help others experience that same process. So today we're going to talk a little bit about leading change. And if there's been one thing that has been consistent through all of the years in the 3 different churches that I've served at, it has been change. It's the only thing that's been consistent in my life is change. And I'm, praise God, that's one of the ways that God has chosen to use me, because I moved 12 times by the time I was 12. I knew change from little on. And so we want to talk a little bit about change. If you're somebody that thinks change is easy, you haven't made big enough change at an old enough place. I love what John Ortberg says. He says that leadership is the art of disappointing people at a rate they can stand. Now that might sound very fatalist to you. It might sound, a little bit depressing, but there's actually a lot of truth to that, because everybody loves change when it's their idea. Many of you in this room say that you love change, but the reality is you don't really love change unless you were a part of coming up with that change. So we have to help people get to the place where they're included in this. There is this process that is incredibly important to the whole thing. So we're going to talk a little bit about the process of leading change. First, you need to bring others into the process. I love that this is a little bit of an extended session of what JJ was talking about. And maybe you just didn't trust the Lord that he was going to cover this when you were talking about excellence. I don't know. I'm just kidding. JJ and I are good friends. We work together a lot at camp and things. But we need to bring others into the process. Include your key leaders, your influencers, and your most trusted people. You have to keep that to be a little bit of a small group. You can't have too big a group for brainstorming and planning. And you have to be really clear about how to set parameters around that. This is our goal. This is what we're trying to brainstorm right now. Or you might find yourself flooded with all these excited ideas from them. They're giving you all these ideas, and they're super committed to things that were not what you were tasking them to come up with. So that's very important. But bring others into that process. Plan and schedule multiple meetings. Have it all laid out before you begin in this process. It's really important, or people will begin to feel like they are leading you. if it looks like you're very unclear about what are we trying to accomplish here, what are we trying to do, if that's the case, they're going to feel like they're leading you, and it's going to be very challenging to be productive. So be organized. Have your things together. Get there before them. I'm saying some pretty obvious things, but it's still very important. Sometimes we know, but that doesn't mean everybody else knows. We know what we're trying to achieve long before we get there. We need to say it in a little bit more plain language than we think we do sometimes, because it's all in our head. But we really do need to be organized and have it all laid out there. So this is all a very important part, is this process, bringing people through this process. I always like to say that that when you're making change, sometimes we're afraid that others are going to be against that change. There are very good reasons we're making that change. And I like to think that if people knew what I knew, that they would make similar or the same decisions that I'm making. So my job is to help them to discover what I know, what I've experienced, to bring them through that process. So I want to talk a little bit about something that you maybe have never heard before. This was brand new to me over this last year. We've gone through an incredible amount of change at Via Church. That's our brand new church name as of Sunday night, if you can believe that. So you guys are some of the first to hear that. But know your church's code. Every church has 5 or 6 core values that make up their code. And there's a good chance your church doesn't know their code if you have a list of core values that's like a page long, 14 core values, 20 core values. Those are likely aspirational. Those are things that everybody says, oh yeah, that's good, I like that one. What you have to understand is that those things don't really guide your organization. Those are things that you see sometimes maybe at a newcomer's orientation or something like that. The reality is the things that actually guide your organization are 5 or 6 core things that everybody can feel, they just don't know how to voice it in any way. There's certain things about your church that are very unique, and God wants to use those in a very positive way. But until you know what those are, it makes it very difficult to work within those. So you have to find a way to discover what that code is, to know it. Whether you use a consultant or do it yourself, learning your code is vital. So here's a few questions that you could ask to try to just begin to discover what your code is. Now these are, and you're welcome to email me or whatever else to get. I have a whole thing of notes that I made, so you don't have to do it all. But these are some things that you can do to get a slight idea. This is not going to be a perfect science. I mean, there are people that have learned for years how to do just this. But here's some questions you can ask. Why do we exist? If you ask people that, maybe in groups of 8 where they feel comfortable, that they can share and not feel like they're on the spot in front of all kinds of people. But don't do it with a whole bunch of your leaders where they feel like they have to say good things. It's actually really best if you can even bring in somebody that's maybe a friend of yours that doesn't even go to your church and say, all right, I'm not even going to write your name next to your comments. Just tell me some of these things. Why do we exist? How has God used this place in the past? What stories are told about this place? I learned all kinds of things about our church through this process of asking questions that I had never even heard of. Apparently we had some group of traveling musical people that did outreaches called Danny and the Defrosters. So that might be something you could use, Danger. Just saying, Danny and the Defrosters. What moments in our history are celebrated? Why do people come here, and what keeps them? People can answer these very quickly. These things really are obvious. Hindsight 2020, they're super obvious at our church. But what is unique about this place, and what are our strengths? When you know those things, they can help you to make change so much more. When I hear things like what Steve's talking about in this compassion ministries area, that's not traditionally an area that the Assemblies of God is strong in. Very much focused on outreach. If you read the original intent of the Assemblies of God from 1914, it was to create the greatest evangelism effort the world has ever known. And 64 of our 67.5 million Assemblies of God people are overseas. That is what we are known for. So I hear something like this, but here's the thing. That's what my church is known for, is compassion. By far the greatest value above all the rest of ours is compassion. So I hear that and I go, note at the very bottom of all of my stuff, I keep a little running thing of just the 4 or 5 key things from this whole thing that I need to do. I stick them right at the bottom so I don't have to go back through and figure it all out later. And I write, I have to look more into what Steve's talking about because that's who we are. That's what we do. So know your code. That's huge if you're actually going to make the changes that God would have you make. Here's one that once it's finally time to begin to talk about this change. First, I love what Pastor Rick Themke says. He says, you need to have the right information to the right people at the right time. Communication has to go from the top leadership down. You can't include too many people too soon if you're not ready for it to be public information. You do have to be smart about the way that you communicate change. So even though I'm saying bring a lot of people in, make it a process, you have to, there's a little bit of an art, and get some outside help from other leaders that you trust on this, but you have to make sure that you're not including too many people in that either until you're ready for that, till it's all organized and ready to go. But when you are ready to go, I'm going to give you a little bit of a process for this. This is something that has helped me from my internship on. I had people come to me later and go, would you present this idea to the board for me? You just seem to get everything you want. I was like, what? That's not what I'm trying to do. You know, but I began to realize that something I heard all the way back in my internship has shaped how I've done everything since then. And this is it. This has been one of the most helpful things for me. What you're going to do, there's this 5-step process to sharing change and to help walk people through the process. First, you're going to share the problem and the present reality. You're just going to talk about, here's what we're facing. This is why this is important. And this has to be very clear. Second, you're going to share what will happen if we continue down that current path. This is if we don't do something about this, if we just sit, we're going to be looking back one day saying, man, we had a crossroads and we went the wrong way, and I'm embarrassed that we didn't do what God had called us to do, that we didn't have that kind of courage. Third, share your proposed solution and how it addresses those problems. Again, hindsight 2020, this is really obvious, but when you get home and you're thinking about making change, I hope that these things are really helpful to you about this, laying these out. Fourth, share the perceived benefits of what could happen if you implement that solution. And then last, share what you're asking your listeners to do. They say that 80% of sales are not closed because the salesman didn't understand the customer's original need and didn't ask for the close. Like, it's just amazing to think of how simple some of these things are. So I'm going to just walk you through really quick an example of a time that we did this. We were coming off of the biggest year of vacation Bible school that we had ever done. But as we were walking into this, we realized something. We could identify times where our We Love Kids banquet had brought all kinds of families. We knew of new kids that had come to faith before. We had different events that we could identify that as. Our Vacation Bible School was originally designed as an outreach event. And when we began to look at things, we couldn't point to anybody that was attending our church or that had made a decision for that. The attendance made us feel really great. Man, look at all those kids. And don't get me wrong, there was definitely valuable things happening there if we were doing it for discipleship purposes. But that's not what we set out to do. We had other discipleship ministries that were working well. And so what we decided we needed to do is take a look at this. And sure enough, we discovered that all kinds of moms figured out this is the cheapest daycare option on the planet. For free, or for $10 a week, or maybe $25 a week if the church is really steep, we can have our kids cared for, learning about Jesus, having fun, playing games, way better than daycare. And then on my lunch break, I can go pick them up, take them to another one. And they'll do that throughout the summer. Or we had kids whose cousins were coming. Or everybody, all these kids were from other churches. And so we began to lay out that problem. We go, guys, is great things happening? Absolutely, but we're not hitting the mark in what we're setting out to do. And if we continue down that path, we're going to keep blowing thousands of dollars in an area that we are already proficient. We're already good at discipleship in this area, in this area, in this area, and we're really failing in the area of outreach. So here's my idea. We began to talk about all kinds of other ideas, and I can't share them all with you because I'm running out of time, but I never wanted to create anything. I didn't feel like I really was going to do that. But we decided that we were going to create this thing called Family Survivor, because one of the core problems we had with something was we couldn't figure out how we could actually have kids coming without parents at an event where we could have families that were not all background checked and then stick them all together. We couldn't figure out how to do that. And so we decided that if we had a tribe leader, we could do such a thing. If we had one background check person and those people invited their neighbors and coworkers who they were already working on, well, we would have a built-in system of follow-up. We would have all these things, and we're laying out all these solutions and why this works so well for us. And we shared what could happen. Imagine families now sitting with their kids for this. We're no longer going, man, I hope mom and dad bring them back. Those kids came to Jesus at this event. I hope mom and dad bring them back. We're no longer doing that, but now instead, the parents experience something too. And the parents see it and they get it, and we are directly skipping a step. We began to see some of those things, and as we share those, everybody's going, that makes total sense. And as we're sharing that with those tribe leaders, they're like, yeah, I could do that. I know the right person I'm going to invite. And we allowed them to even select their tribe in all the competition. And we had a shared experience outreach event, which was really cool. And then we shared what we're asking them to do. So I need your help to build this. I need your help in prayer. I need your help by being a tribe leader. You just need to be very direct at what that specifically is. So that's an example of how you would use something like that, how that process helps to walk someone through. So be careful not to talk about change like it's the ultimate program or it's never going to die. Everything has a shelf life. Be more married to the message than the method. Leave room for changing your mind. Maybe it doesn't do what you thought it was going to do. I love what Pastor Rick Themke says. He says the vision truck has reverse. And let your people know that we will evaluate this. And if it's not doing what it should do, we'll back it up. It's okay. Allow us room to fail. Then be humble and lift up those who helped in the process. Don't take on all the credit. I am only allowed to be entrusted with this information. I didn't originate any of it. All truth is God's truth. None of it's mine. Keep the mission at the center the whole time, and it'll work out just fine for you. Thanks you guys so much for allowing me to be a part of your day. Appreciate it.